Welcome everybody to our 5th year doing the Azure Gov Meetup. Thank you for your time and joining us tonight. Tonight we always think about how do we kick off a new year, and I think the best thing we can do is really go through mastering the cloud fundamentals for government in 2021. So really getting down to the fundamentals of cloud. We've brought together some amazing experts. Thank you to all the folks who are volunteering their time today. So this is going to be a very exciting meetup for all of us, and welcome back for the folks who've been joining us and for new people tonight. If you're on social media and like to tweet, our hashtag is hashtag Azure Gov Meetup. So please join us in that conversation. With that, let me introduce myself. My name is Karina Hami. I'm part of the Azure Government Engineering team based in Washington, D.C., and founder of the Meetup, along with Vishwas Lele. He's the CTO at AIS. He's also an MVP for Microsoft. So we both started this Meetup to create what we call kind of a safe area, non-sales environment, really for practitioners to come together, really discuss what are the platform capabilities. So we often bring our Azure product engineers to bear, or our frontline folks in the field who are doing great work with government and our partners. And we like to invite also sometimes our partners and federal agencies to come and talk about their best practices. So we're really trying to showcase innovation and best practices. Tonight, we'll have a lot more of just the learning of kind of the basics, and hopefully some very helpful links when it comes to where to go for more information. In 1 hour, we can't cover in depth as much as we'd like to, but we'd like to point you to the right resources. So with that, please spread the word. We're always looking for great new topic ideas. So I say this in every meetup. If you have any topic or speaker ideas, please email me. My email's right there. So please let me know what you want to hear about, and if there are any suggestions on topics, format, time. Tonight we're testing out a new time, 6 to 7. So hopefully that'll work. I know a lot of us are getting a little fatigued being at our desks all day in this time of COVID. So we're just trying to figure out what works best for everybody. So here's our calendar. We try to do the last Wednesday every month. So February 24th, don't miss that. And then we have March 24th, so easy to remember. And then April 28th. So again, any topic ideas, speaker ideas, or format, please send me an email. I really appreciate it. So with that, we really want to jump into the content. We have great content tonight. We have 4 amazing speakers to talk about the fundamentals for Azure and cloud for government. So with that, let me introduce the 4 speakers tonight. So we have Caroline Jones. She works with our Department of Defense, and she's an Azure specialist. And then we have, following her, Sherri, Tony, and Jason, and I'll let them introduce themselves as we go along. So with that, I'll pass it over. Caroline?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it is great to meet all of you, and thanks for joining tonight. So to kick off our 2021 session on cloud fundamentals, I'm going to walk us through how the United States government can harness the power of cloud computing to make faster decisions and increase innovation so that we can focus on mission success. So as Karina said, I am an Azure specialist covering the United States Army, and I am excited to be here tonight. So a couple of common challenges that we're seeing across the United States government. As we talk to government customers, there are several key challenges that frequently surface, and each of these challenges is magnified by the sheer scale of operations at the DoD and the federal civilian agencies as well. So to start, how do we harness the massive amounts of data gathered around the world so that it can be used to derive insights and make better decisions? Next, how do we reduce legacy debt and also free up resources for innovation so that we can move mission-focused initiatives forward more rapidly? And how do we do all of this while facing a rapidly evolving threat landscape, scaling up cyber forces, and ensuring that we stay ahead of adversaries? Finally, how to sustain a higher level of readiness across all federal agencies and the United States Department of Defense so that we can ensure mission success. So as we work with customers in the US government, we see several areas of opportunity, areas that are foundational to mission success both today and tomorrow. So first, the opportunity to build a unified data strategy for the mission. So no matter where your data is located and no matter where your insights are needed, that can be data at the extreme tactical edge in disconnected or intermittent scenarios. It can be data fed in by satellite or submarine. Essentially, no matter where the mission leads you, we want to ensure you can harness that data for faster, better decisions. Second, we had the opportunity to modernize those mission systems for speed to innovation. So the end goal is to get new capabilities into the hands of servicemen and women as quickly as possible. And modernization is essential to that end goal. So we want to help the US government reduce the need to manage legacy infrastructure, migrating and modernizing applications so that they can continue to serve the purpose that they were built for. Third, the opportunity to lead the mission with connected cyber ops. So this brings together connected cybersecurity across your digital estate, staying ahead of advanced threats, and building a zero trust architecture that works across assets, data, and identities. And finally, the opportunity to enable secure remote collaboration globally. So this is obviously a hot topic today, and this includes enabling remote work while keeping data within the appropriate boundary. So that also means enabling collaboration with team members in remote and disconnected environments. So what Azure Government uniquely enables is a continuum of compute from on-prem to the cloud to the far edge, whether you're working with classified or unclassified data. So with this unified data platform, you can harness that data for artificial intelligence and machine learning applications, gaining deeper insights and the ability to make more informed strategic decisions. So with that being said, we have the Azure Government Cloud. So when you look across the range of environments available to support your workloads, you likely have workloads that require a higher compliance standard, such as IL6 or ICD 503. There are also some workloads that are best suited for IL2 in the US government space, and some that need to be either IL4 or 5. So many US government customers work across cloud regions, and we commonly provide architectural guidance and technical support to help you ensure that the right data is stored in the right environment. In general, our guidance is to choose Azure Government if you have specific compliance requirements that are only met by these regions. So one thing also to point out here is that this is all encompassing Microsoft Azure. So we are consistently working to make sure that you are having top of the line cloud experience, no matter which level your data should sit. So what is Azure Government? Azure Government brings you the broadest range of commercial innovation for the mission. So this is part of our ongoing commitment to the mission, and it means continuously bringing new services into the boundaries of Azure Government. It also means continuously moving these services through the accreditation regimes that our US government customers require. So a quick overview on this slide here is that we have all of the typical cloud infrastructure options that you see. So compute, networking, storage, of course, security, but also we can take that to the serverless category, and also we have the edge devices available in Azure Government as well. So no matter what you are trying to do in what specific environment, Azure Government has this essentially broad range of secure and compliant offerings. So when you have many apps running on different hardware across on-prem, cloud, and edge, it's obviously no small task to manage these disparate environments at scale and also ensure that uncompromised security and enable developer agility. So our goal with Azure Government is to help you uniquely meet these challenges, giving you the flexibility to innovate anywhere in your hybrid environment and with that consistent experience from cloud to edge. So we have recently announced Azure Sentinel as well. So this provides you with the first cloud native security information and event management solution on the market. So what this does is it provides intelligent security analytics at a cloud scale for your entire enterprise. So wherever your assets exist, whether that's on-prem, whether that's in Azure, or even in another cloud, Microsoft's integrated approach to threat protection covers your entire organization. So we want to make sure that you have that always secure, always protected environment, no matter where your data sits. So what Azure Sentinel does is it collects security data across your hybrid organization from devices, users, apps, servers, and other clouds as well. And it helps use the power of artificial intelligence to ensure you can identify real threats quickly. This also eliminates the need to spend time setting up, maintaining, and also scaling infrastructure as well. And we're able to offer that limitless cloud scale and speed. So we are global. We, want to, of course, maintain latency and the highest availability around the globe. So we support Azure regions around the world so that you do have the fastest and most resilient global network in the public cloud. We also have more than 160 edge sites across the globe so that you can have that sub 30 millisecond latency across the planet if you're in a disconnected environment as well. We also heavily invest in security. We spend over $1 billion annually in cybersecurity investment. So that's one of the perks of using a government cloud versus having an entire database up to you and your organization to control, is that simply economies of scale, and we can provide that consistent security monitoring and massive cybersecurity investment. We also have 92 compliance offerings, from certifications to laws we abide by, like GDPR, for example, and all of the NIST standards too. And then we also like to offer those end-to-end capabilities I mentioned earlier, in that we want to deliver these unique cloud services to the tactical edge. So we have this new portable Azure Stack and modular data center portfolio from Microsoft. And these are generally available in Azure, Azure Government, and Azure Government Secret. So this includes the Azure Modular Data Center, which is essentially a data center scale compute and storage resources in this massive container. So you can put this 40-foot, 400,000-pound data center in a disconnected environment, and it can actually run 3 separate security enclaves, allowing mission users to operate workloads across multiple data classifications as well. And then we also have, as you see, the Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack Pro R, and Azure Stack Edge Mini R. So these are ruggedized to meet your needs at the edge. And one cool thing about the Azure Stack Edge Mini R is it's actually 7 pounds and can fit in a backpack. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Tony. Thank you all for your time today. And I know that Tony has got some great, far more exciting fast track opportunities, if you will. Tony, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Carolyn. It's a fantastic presentation, and I really enjoyed it. All right, with that said, my name is Anthony de Lagarde. I am with the FastTrack for Azure. We're a 6P engineering team, and one of the goals that we have is that we're trying to push out more of our engineering resources to the field to work with our customers. We're a customer success unit. And with that said, we have a presentation tonight, 0 to 60, Jumpstart Your Azure Cloud Migration, which will basically enhance the presentation that Carolyn Jones just did. All right, with that said, let's go to the next slide. All right. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. I'm Anthony de Lagarde, Sherri,
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Okay, and we also have Jason Maston tonight that's manning the actual moderation job. He'll be answering your questions and we'll be following up for you tonight, okay? All right, the topics of discussion tonight are the following: migration planning, what's really important, what to look for, and what actually meets the fluff and what's actually vital. Where we'll talk about the cloud adoption framework. This is something that clearly right now we are using this as a framework to help our customers accelerate their journey to the cloud. And then we're also going to talk about the migration and deployment actual process. The things that you really need to look at that over the last couple of years, our FastTrack engineers have seen are actually the difference between success and failure. And then we'll be more than happy to open up a Q&A session for any questions that you have. Next slide. All right, migration planning. There's a saying that says that without planning, your type of planning, you're planning to fail. So let's get that plan started. So within the cloud adoption framework, there are several areas that we have that right now we break down into modules. Now, some of these are very obvious, but we'll just reiterate with them just to make sure that we strike home the point of how important they are in terms of not only technology, but also culture. The first one is stakeholder alignment. The main point right there is make sure that everybody has a shared vision and understand exactly what you're striving to. Sherri, out of curiosity, when you work with your customers, what do you usually see in terms of ability to, like, say, make sure that there's a unified vision?
Usually they're planning meetings, mostly from that perspective, both at the technical and the project level, and where they bring everybody together at some intervals to be able to make sure that they're all talking the same language, they're all tracking the same timelines, and making sure that they have the resources they needed to meet the deadlines established.
Excellent. The other thing also too that you would want to do is make sure that early on you want to talk with your business, understand what they're looking for to get out of the cloud, and also bring home that dreaded word, security. Get those on the team, get buy-in from them. The second part of the whole the cloud adoption framework is workload assessment. What does this really mean? All right, you want to go to the cloud. What is it you're trying to get out of it? What applications or portfolios within your application you want to move to the cloud? Make sure that you pick things that make sense and are easy to move. Don't start off with the most complex applications within your portfolio. You're only going to set yourself up for success. The other thing that I also would say, and I think Sherri, you would also agree to this, is for all intents and purposes, make sure that while you're moving these applications right there, rather than trying to refactor on-prem, maybe the quickest thing to do is to move the applications to Azure, and then from there, refactor them as needed. What are your thoughts on that, Sherri?
I would agree. Sometimes we've seen where customers come in, they haven't been in Azure before, they have some idea of cloud, they think it's the same as it's going to be on-prem, and there's so many different factors to consider, from governance, resetting your identity, security, trying to get it reaccredited in a cloud environment versus an on-prem environment. All those come into factor, not just the application, but the entire workload and the supporting resources that go with it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too. If you use one of our tools, and we have a lot of tools within the ecosystem from partners as well as Microsoft, but the Azure Migrate application, it actually has the ability that when you deploy it within your data center, it will start to scan and look for interdependencies, things that basically you didn't think that talk to each other within your data center, and it will automatically give you a report. And it would also provide to you with best estimates what size of virtual machine or system that you need to move that particular physical or virtual system up into Azure. So you have that armed. Many times we see customers that they're basically are hamstrung. The developer is retired, they've left, nobody wrote documentation, and no one knows how the application really works. This tool can cut down a lot of that mystery and help you plan. Now, one area that I really think is important that most organizations do not invest time into is the skilling and readiness. They kind of like, to a certain degree, they give this to their contractor or they give this to a consultant and they walk away hoping that that person will work. The one thing that I would ask Sherri, what are kind of things that you want to do in this phase right here for your team, not only your architects and also your consumers or your operations?
Evaluates what their skill sets. A lot of times you've seen very successfully people that have been not working in cloud come through, do a migration. They were the person in the job. They have the most experience of the applications that are being migrated. Very valuable. And so getting them up to speed is a quick win. And we have some great resources out there under CAF. If you go out to the Cloud Adoption Framework, we actually, under each one of those sections that we have is how to skill up your personnel and give you some training plans.
And the most important thing, and I want you to kind of put yourself in the mind, there's a lot of angst and friction where people are going to the cloud. People are a little afraid. They've been working in a on-prem environment for years. They know what they know, and they feel they're going to get exposed. I would say go out and do a little bit of coaching, do a little bit of mentoring, reassurance that you're going to give these people the tools that they need to succeed and get the friction and angst, because ultimately you want to succeed in this role of this deploying something out into Azure, making sure that that team definitely has a total buy-in right there. Now, the next section of the CAF framework talks about designing the landing zone. What do we mean by designing the landing zone? This is basically the virtual network, the environment, as well as your identity and network to support your actual workloads. Let me ask you a question, Sherri. What are the areas that you think that most of our customers tend to miss because sometimes they overanalyze, analysis by paralysis, or basically they just don't even bring it in to the scheme of conversation? What are your thoughts?
I think part of that is a lot of the governance work that goes in. How are they going to connect? What their identity solutions going to be? Who's going to have rights to what? Will that map over from their on-prem is the easiest, trying to map it to a cloud, but are those the right people for your team? And then trying to go through one basic security piece. Okay, I have a connection, I can get to the cloud, but they forget to lock down that front door.
Exactly. Now, there's two things. If there's anything that you get out of this presentation tonight, these are the 2 points I want to make. Identity and networking. Those are the 2 pillars for any success and failure. If you get them right, everything from there is downhill. You'll be great, no problems. If you don't get the identity and network squared away as part of this planning and designing of your landing zone, it's going to be an uphill battle that you may never recover from and paint yourself into that. All right. And what I mean by that is make sure you understand your namespace. You consult with somebody if you're not sure, but also make sure you have the proper IP space to work and also align with things like, say, the TIC in the federal government, trusted internet connection. That's something that you want to be able to understand how that works with cloud. And then lastly, developing a migration plan. This is really the crux of like, how do we plan the game plan for that night that we're going to go and deploy this? Talk to me about some of the considerations here, Sherri, that you'd like to see with your customers in preparing for this process.
Yep, everything that we've talked about so far goes into that migration plan. A lot of times what I'd like to do is to recommend that they start from the backwards forwards. What are their goals? What do they want to do? What's their timeline? And then backwards map to what they need actually to get that to success. What does that timeline look like? Who are the people that we need to bring in to make that happen? What resources, additional resources that we need to go through? What training do we need? And then map that out from a migration plan, and being able to map that forward.
Fantastic. Excellent, excellent right there, point she's brought right there. Let's move to the next slide.
If I can click correctly. Sorry
No worries.
Yes.
No worries about it. All right. So here is something that typically you see when one of our CAF architecture patterns. You can actually download this from our page, and it actually gives a typical, what we call an architectural diagram and overlay of a typical IaaS solution. There's also other patterns there that address platform as a service and integration with IaaS and PaaS. The one thing that we want to look right here is you see a connection from on the left-hand side that covers everything from your on-premise location that goes across either via an express route or maybe even a site-to-site VPN into your Azure environment. The basic pattern that you want to do here and follow is separate your workloads, your web tier, your business tier, also known as your central apps or middle apps, and their database tier. Separate them and put like-for-like systems together. There is also something right there that looks like a little lock. It's a network security group. That particular construct or feature in Azure gives you the ability to give you a layer 3 type of firewall in addition to the network virtual appliances that you have from our marketplace. The goal is, how do I protect, make sure that the proper routing and proper communication between the applications and the consumers of my service, be it from either on-prem or from also from outside the general internet, how do I protect my resources? Question, Sherri, what typically are some of the challenges that you hear from customers when it comes to, like, say, hey, how do I get this VM to work? How do I talk to customers outside and inside?
Usually they're routing, and that front door, going back to that basic front door of they don't quite understand how it is all interconnected. What is Azure backend supported resources? What Azure talks to Azure versus what am I going to do from an on-prem perspective? How am I going to talk across subscriptions? Those are a lot of things. How's my web application going to talk to my database, and working through those.
And here's the thing you said that's very, very valuable. A lot of times we have customers, they ask this question: how many subscriptions do you need? Well, here's what I would say, without really knowing the business and the impetus right there. Think about this. Before you start adding a bunch of subscriptions to your enterprise agreement and start working in them, think about, what am I doing? Why am I adding this? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? For most customers, I'm going to go with a very broad and blanket statement. You need 2 subscriptions, one for production and one for actual development and test. Now, I've seen some customers effectively use only 1 subscription and firewall off both environments in the same actual subscription. It works well, but there's a little level of more of efficiencies and also understanding of the environment that they put into that to make that to work. Also, in addition, what you want to do is start minimizing the actual click to the actual portal and get more to what we talk about development in terms of DevOps. How do I push this out through code? Let's actually go to the actual constructs of what this really means. All right, so we've been talking a lot about theory. We've been talking about process. We've been talking about cultural. All right, here comes the actual guts and meats of the presentation. To end-to-end testing, there's something we talked about earlier about Azure Migrate, where you can actually test not once, not twice, but 3 times or 4 times, or how many times you want to go and test over a migration. During this period and process, what are some of the things, Sherri, that through a FastTrack process we like to see?
We really like to see that that is successful, that from an application standpoint, that it gets all the way through. It's doing what the stated requirements we're allowing it to do. From a network security perspective, the traffic's routing as it should, the accesses as it should, and then coming really back down to what the purpose is providing service to your customers as you go through in deployment. We provide a service from an infrastructure standpoint, but we're here to support you.
But really, at the end of the day, this is really, for all intents and purposes, a dress rehearsal. So one of the things that we like to say is right here, these are the things about insertives of like, hey, did my network properly route? Did my network ingest the actual traffic? And did Azure Migrate or my third-party tool work as needed? Here's a couple quick things that we like to say. If you're planning to build out a virtual network, we usually recommend to start off either the single virtual network or a hub and spoke topology. Our virtual network sizes, what we tend to see a lot of times our customers is they start off with a really small network address range and they run out of space. Try to run something around like a /21, which translates to about 2,000 IPs to start putting your workloads. Over time, you'll see how quickly that fills up. The other thing that you also want to do is make sure that you have IPs that don't overlap with, let's say, for instance, on-prem or with your other cloud service provider. It may be AWS or the Google Cloud, or primarily maybe a third party that's interfacing with your actual enterprise. Now, the POC workload migration. During this period right here, we said, don't pick the most complex applications to go and deploy into production. Pick 2 or 3, which we call canaries, to actually go. This is a process where you're making sure that all of your migration planning and testing is coming through and it's been thought out. You may find some problems during this process. Don't worry about it. That's why we picked the 3 lowest, easiest applications to move to ferret out the process. Out of curiosity, Sherri, what else do you like to see during this period of time?
Really, also going through while you're going through that POC workload testing to see the other teams that are involved from a security, identity, operations standpoint, what their monitoring is. There's different work streams even going through each of those that need to be addressed. And this is a perfect place to start identifying those.
Good. Now, the part we have right here about impact assessment, this is something that I'd like to raise for you. Once we move those 3 applications, sit and wait. Don't go to the next set of applications. What you want to do if you're an architect, a business decision maker, or operations manager, you want to see basically, okay, how does this operation change from moving my system from on-prem to Azure has affected the business, the consumers of the service, and how are my day-to-day operations responding to this? You may want to even have, like, say, for instance, maybe a debrief and go give it a week or 2 before you attempt your next migration to see if any problems surface. Also, during this period of time, you're going to want to start planning and seeing if there are any ticket counts, anything is going up, any issues. Sometimes there's some false positives because people know that you've moved their cheese to Azure and they start inventing things that have never happened before. Just be sure that you are able to look at what's really valid feedback, take it with a grain of salt, be objective about it, address it, and then move on. Don't let this part be sort of a blocker to you moving forward. Now, start the migration waves. We usually say create migration waves in ripples. You want to say, at FastTrack, we usually do something like in minor, major migrations as we start moving workloads, be it IaaS or platform as a service, known as PaaS. One thing that we always recommend is that you always constantly, this is a big thing, do a test migration before you actually move your workloads into Azure. You have a test migration that you present, and you could go over if there are any issues during that test migration without actually having any risk. It will surface. Was there an issue with, like, say, for a Linux server, any issues with the kernel, the network? Those are the things you want to look. If the actual test migration works, guess what? Now you can actually move forward with confidence and fail that system over to the actual production system. And then one more thing to also say, I want you to call out. Most of my customers, this tends to be an issue, and I want to raise this. Always architect with the intent of thinking that there may be failure. Yes, I'm with Microsoft. I work for Azure team. We deploy a robust platform, but I always want to architect and plan for failure. Always have basically a primary and a secondary system. Sherri, I know that we have sometimes some customers that actually give us some type of pushback on it, like I'll do it later. How do we overcome some of those challenges and arguments? How would you approach that?
Most of the time we go through and give them facts. We present the information that they can be successful. When you don't consider things like high availability, if that's a requirement, security, if that's a requirement, and start walking through why those things are important from a migration standpoint, because they're going to impact you long term, whether it be financially, whether it be compromised. And so part of that is to make sure everything is working as it should be from a wave perspective, establishing your minimal viable product, not only from your operational standpoint, but also from your application standpoint, and start doing that iterative control where you're constantly monitoring, planning, and designing and deploying to add more features as you see that need in your environment grows.
Excellent information right there. This is really a lot of times more of a business conversation and talking to the actual people that are the stakeholders, the holders of the actual applications, owners of them. But more importantly, it's basically giving them the full-fledged information to make the proper decisions. Now, as we complete the migrations, we come to the point we have to transition this over to operations. What I would say, and this is something I also seen happen a lot of times during the migrations, people wait a lot of times at the last minute, say, hey, I'm throwing it over the fence, here you go. Don't do that. What you really want to do is make sure that during the migration process, you have your operations teams lockstep and ready to work with you. During that process, you're developing some muscle tissue, some confidence, and most importantly, you want to make sure that they're aware of how these systems work, and now they're in the cloud. Don't give something to somebody at the 11th hour and say, this is your problem to handle. One thing I would like to also count out, and Sherri, I know that over time you've been very influential in basically working and bring teams together. What are some of the keys that you think are to basically get the operations early in, also security as well into this?
starting as part of the beginning with the stakeholder, bringing them in. They don't have to be part of every conversation, but setting up those operational, start going back and forth and being transparent as far as your deadlines, what you need to do, so they can start feeding back. They will start going back through, giving you that technical information that you need to be able to incorporate into the plan so that you can continue to remove those obstacles and be successful.
Excellent. So let's review very quickly the end-to-end testing. As you're getting ready to build up and move that first migration, go through the dress rehearsal, look at your actual migration plan and validate that the steps are there and you haven't left anything to chance. 2, look at the POC, pick 2 or 3 applications, maybe simple and maybe one a little moderate, and then actually move it up into Azure, validate it. Make sure that the landing zone that you have, which we call the virtual network or the environment that's going to host both your identity as well as your monitoring and your backups, that it can actually grow over time as business changes. Look at the impact and assessment. What does that mean? Validate that the business can actually ingest this change and also can move with the actual implementation of a new application in Azure. We want to eventually get you from an IaaS infrastructure as a service to platform as a service moving forward. And then also, as you start your migrations, make sure that you communicate with your stakeholders. Make sure that everybody feels that they have a piece and a part of this. Ultimately, you want to be one cohesive team that communicates a lot. With that, let's go to the next page. All right, during this point, I'd like to also say this is our Q&A. We'd like to say, hey, if anybody would like to ask questions, please. Sherri and myself will be here to answer. And also, if you want, we also have Carolyn, my colleague, too, as well. We also invite you to also participate in this Q&A session. That maybe there might be some areas that you might be better suited to answer than we are. Okay.
Sounds great. I'm on the line waiting and ready for all the questions we'll get.
Yeah. So the main thing what we drove home right there is, hey, network and identity, those are 2 things. Once you get those ready and you're good, everything pretty much falls into lock and step. Carolyn, anything from your perspective when you work with the BDMs, the business decision makers, that really help?
You know, absolutely, I'm with you on identity. It's kind of like once you've got your identity secured and once you've got that figured out, it's kind of downhill from there, and it's an easier implementation, if you will. So that's kind of my thoughts on y'all's presentation, and that was fabulous. So thank you for outlining what your teams can do for customers too.
Excellent. Now we have a question in the chat. Somebody asked about, do you recommend DevOps CI/CD pipeline in the cloud to migrate from non-prod environments and then to production? Yes, we do say that is ultimately the way that you want to go. You want to do unit testing and deployment through CI/CD pipelines. You can use either various tools. There's Azure DevOps Server, there's Jenkins, whatever you have that can actually plug into our fabric and talk to our APIs. The one thing that I want to be very clear about this, once again, everybody has a different level of maturity. Don't feel at day one you have to master this process. Work your way up, build confidence to get to that point. But the question about using DevOps and CI/CD pipelines is definitely lockstep with the way you should manage your environment to take a lot of the human aspect out, the manual aspect out, and let's use a buzzword, infrastructure as code. This is where the industry is going. Sherri or Carolyn, do you have anything you'd like to add from that perspective?
I would say that it also increases security. If you're deploying everything by code, you're going to get repetitive processes. You can adjust things as well, and you can redeploy when needed if you have to adjust things to make them more secure or from a service perspective, make it more impactful.
Excellent. And the other thing also too is I think that your actual failure rate actually starts to decrease, because now you have it to the point where you actually can start deploying this over and over in variations and versions as you start altering the code, patching, and changing configurations as needed.
You hit that. You hit that right with the configuration change, because through the process, you should have release pipelines. So you will have people, instead of somebody making an arbitrary change in your environment, you'll be able to track that. You'll be able to set approval where somebody can't make a change at midnight unless there's another person to approve it or two people to approve it. So that really comes into that control and being able to also export that data for your accreditation packages.
All right, so we have a great question right here about Azure training. Does Azure training courses allow you to walk through a migration production as you let me see, indicated on the previous slides? Yes, so there's a couple things right here. So many different organizations, when they're actually going to, like, say, for training, there's actual modules and courses depending upon the vendor of choice. They'll have set up a plan to basically have you walk through migrating maybe a VM that's quote unquote on-prem and moving up into Azure and showing you how to do that. Also, in addition, if you're ready to actually move your workloads into Azure, what you can do, you can nominate yourself or go through your account executive or your account representative with Microsoft and actually have an Azure FastTrack engineer to work with you to build up that particular memory muscle and actually help you move your actual workloads up into Azure. But yes, talk to your reps and your vendors. They may have some courses specifically for Azure Migrate. We think they're called them like Rockstar training plans. You can definitely reach out and just inquire about that. All right, so we have another question. Can you read that, Sherri, for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking over here. That's why I'm turning. Moving from IaaS to PaaS. I know it depends on the environment and the org, and its resources itself. Do you have a tool for assessment and migration?
Yes, we have the Azure Migrate tool, which basically, when you actually use that, it actually does a scan of your actual infrastructure, and it gives you basically a report. We also have a lot of partners within the ecosystem. Recently, we acquired Mover, but there's a lot of other partners out there that provide this service. Also, that's coming new to Azure Migrate is the ability to migrate say workloads that are basically on-prem to Kubernetes, Azure Kubernetes services. That's just something that's new and big. We're seeing a lot of change in the industry where people usually were treating Azure as the other hypervisor, just moving a VM from one silo to another. We're seeing now customers getting really comfortable in the industry and in the actual deployment, actually circumventing IaaS and now going straight to serverless and moving their data to it. They've seen that they've been able to reduce the actual abstraction of the code from the hardware and make things a lot more easier from them during that migration. What other question do we have here?
I would also call out real quick Caroline's PowerPoint slide presentation as she went through and briefed. By going to PaaS, it also reduces your overhead from an administrative standpoint because Azure's taking care. We've been approved, FedRAMP, to be able to, from a compliance perspective. So it's not only easier for you on a management perspective long-term by going that route, but also from a compliance and regulatory perspective, we're going to get your accreditations. It makes it a lot easier as well.
Okay, so we have one question right here about Azure DevOps Server. It's on the public cloud, and you can also use it for government. So I want to be very transparent with everybody. Azure DevOps today does not have a FedRAMP high type of classification. You can use it with Azure Government as needed, but that's once again a business decision. If security and your business leaders say that, hey, I cannot have this SaaS service interact with my golden assets, well, guess what? You actually have the Azure DevOps server, which you can deploy as a virtual machine within your environment to help you deploy. There's also things like, this little organization we recently became best buddies with and purchased. There's Enterprise GitHub. You can actually use that right there to also deploy as a VM2 in your environment if you need be. Okay. Carolyn, anything you would like to add from your perspective?
No, I think those were both just excellent answers there and both great discussion. I would like to say you're so right around the PaaS conversation. It not only allows you to speed up or really have a hands-off approach to the regulatory compliance issue, but also you can have kind of a hands-off approach to, in general, the operating system maintenance and updates and hardware failover and everything like that. We really just make it easier, and kind of a tagline of PaaS, if you will, is just allowing you to focus on app development.
All right, so we have a very interesting question right here, which talks about identity. The question says, how does Azure Gov Cloud apply AI to keep identity safe, as an example? So there's a couple things you can do with that. We do a lot of logging and monitoring of where typical logins come from. When you set up an account, you can say, this is the region that this person will log in from. Also, as you start going up in the higher SKUs between P1, P2, and P3, there's different things that you can do to actually implement things like conditional access. We do monitor what we talk about, the norms of what activity is normal. We take a benchmark and we log that through Azure AD to see if there's anything that's abnormal that hits a day-to-day operations. Carolyn and Sherri, how do you like to address that question too as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on a call today and they were asking some of those questions with a customer. How do we protect from, preventing anyone from outside the US from connecting to our environment? Absolutely. They do go through Azure AD conditional access. We're also looking at as not only risk behavior, basically going through and saying this is not using the back end, and they are using AI to identify that, and going through and evaluating how that identity is, well, how that user is coming in that's not normal, what their normal patterns are. And so they're actually starting to go through and monitor that. I'm sure you might get a few false positives, but in the end, you can set different rule sets like require MFA, re-log in and use the MFA so that they come back in and they have to recertify they are who they are.
Yeah. Also, we have another question here about Azure DevOps Server, which seems to be very, very popular tonight. Is there a cloud solution plan for Azure DevOps similar to commercial? All right, so right now, currently, the answer is no. The Azure DevOps solution, as we have it, is a SaaS solution, which you can connect to both commercial as well as to government. Once again, it comes down to what your ISO says is available to use and are comfortable having you use. If you are not allowed to use a SaaS solution, you could put a DevOps server in a VM in your environment. But no, the question at this point in time, this is good feedback. We'll take it back to the product group. But for right now, we don't think that there'll be a separate offering for government. Carolyn, do you have any insight into that?
I don't, and I wish I did. Right now, my insight and my direction is honestly exactly what you said. You can put that on a separate VM and run in those secure environments.
All right, we have another question right here, and I apologize. My eyes are not what they used to be. I'm a little
I got you.
Tooth.
Any recommendations or opinions on Azure DevOps versus GitOps? GitHub seems to be somewhat separate entity from Azure DevOps from cloud perspective. Any recommendations?
My first recommendation is go with what's comfortable for you. If it's not a...
Sorry, I think we're seeing somebody's desktop as well.
Oh, that would be mine.
No worries.
Sorry.
Hopefully it was a good picture.
No, I was trying to line inside. Never mind.
Never mind. It's all good.
I didn't mean to distract you. Yes, please go ahead.
No, that's good. It's good. All right. So here's the deal. Like I said, go with what makes sense to you from a business perspective and actually fits the business need. Don't try and change the way you work because you think you need to do this to come into Azure. Azure is very much an open platform where we decide not at an early point not to lock you into a Microsoft-centric thought process. What we rather look at you and your business and your code. You bring it in and interface with our APIs and our solution set on your terms, not ours. I don't know. From that perspective, Sherri or Carol, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that's spot on. You have to go with what you're comfortable. I know some of the government customers now that GitHub AE is now open, they're starting to migrate over to that from a deployment perspective, but I think it's really what you're comfortable with. Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions? Let me see. We have another question that popped up. Let's see what it says. If Sherri or Caroline, if any of you have a better clear glasses or better at seeing what this is,
go ahead.
Good.
I asked for GitHub Enterprise, but it's separate fees, so Azure DevOps was less expensive.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, a little joke right here. Yes, we're capitalists. All right. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is the Azure DevOps server pretty much comes, you have X amount of transactions you can do that are free until you hit a certain amount of transactions with it. The GitHub Enterprise, there is a fee for that. And it's a product, it's a SKU, and it definitely comes with a lot of tool sets. Now, with that said, since we have purchased and GitHub about a year and a half ago, a lot of the interdependencies in terms of strategy long-term, we do have communications that's there. We see this as one of the premier tools that you have right there for the actual development community, and we're trying to basically enhance better together, if that makes sense. I hope that answered your question the way I understood it.
I think at least from previous customers that I've worked with, they've used basically deploy TFS on a VM in Azure and use that, and it was all still internal.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we see right now.
Yep. And we also see a lot of customers, for all intents and purposes, which I would recommend against this. There's a classic file server with the PowerShell scripts. If that works for you, that's fine. Just make sure that that is backed up. But we usually would ask that you take some of those assets and put them someplace safe, where in the event that, let's say, Bob retires or Bob becomes disgruntled and he decides to erase and delete your content, I hope you have it backed up. Make sure that your actual code doesn't have any hard-coded passwords or phrases. Try to move to things like certificates or passphrases or secrets when you deploy your code into Azure. And the one thing that I would like to also raise again is, remember, if Sherri, myself, and Carolyn can just impart on this, please, the biggest part of your whole planning exercise is around the network. It is not necessarily black magic. A lot of the same rules that apply to on-prem will work into Azure. You just need to be aware of some of the nuances. All right, let me see. We have another question coming in right here.
I got it. Speaking of Azure DevOps server, is there a cloud solution planned for ADO similar to commercial and gov? But I think we've already answered that. Or is the plan to stay with DevOps server for government workloads?
For right now, that's it right now. We don't have a separate solution that's out there right now. And like I said, we can probably take this as a feedback to our product group and raise this. But right now, we don't have any separation or plans in the works for this. Question for the forum, mainly the workloads you have on-prem, they tend to be Windows, Linux? Do we have a lot of physical? Are we on VMware? What kind of workloads do you see right now typically in your data centers?
I'm seeing a lot more Windows than Linux, but that's just me. What about you, Sherri?
I've seen a lot of Linux as well, actually.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then either trying a database too. We see Oracle. We see a lot of different types, a lot of migration. So when they're coming in from an app perspective, they may be trying to migrate to an app service from their Windows or from their Linux, and then trying to modernize that. I would say, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, guess what? Does everybody know that actually 55% of all workloads in Azure are actually open source? They're not even Windows anymore.
Yep.
We're not your mom and pop's Microsoft team anymore. Anyway, we're coming towards the end of our presentation with that. Any last words, Carolyn or Sherri? Any goodness, any recipes you want to give?
You know, I've got a great chocolate chip cookie recipe, but you'll have to join February's session for that one. But no, it's been great talking with you guys, and thank you everyone for joining as well.
All right, so let's move over to our resources slide, because one of the things is, other than us just talking, we want to leave behind some tools. Here are a couple links about the actual strategy and also concepts we talked. There's also, for instance, a very simple, that second bullet right there, Azure FastTrack lift and shift DC migrations. This is our GitHub page where we literally condense, which is a very effective framework in CAF, and we break it down into 7 modules that are very simple and easy, that if you look at it, you're like, oh, well, I can do this. It makes it very simple. We demystify some of the actual angst. Also, the Azure Academy, my friend and good colleague, Dean Safola, he runs that. He's a FastTrack engineer, and he works very closely with our WVD, Windows Virtual Desktop PG. He has tons of materials. If you're looking for training, there's tons of materials that are very simple and easy to follow in videos. As an IT pro, you're looking for the answers, not the fluff. Anything on here strikes you before we go? Sherri, also that there's the Azure Learn and Meetup channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to capture that with the Azure Academy, it's free. So it's just about subscribing to his channel, not necessarily paying for anything. I would say a lot of the biggest thing that comes to me when I look at this is going through, especially for new migrations or just a refresher, we're updating things all the time, things are changing, is get out to the CAF. There's templates, there's tools, there's different information. It really tries to break it down, make it a little bit easier for you to plan your migration. It gives some references for dev, especially from a gov. If you see that gov document site, they'll have the differences between commercial and gov for your developers. So there's things there that you want to take a look at, and then keep on top with the blog, especially for gov, because they're constantly working behind the scenes to get new things updated to match up. We're trying to reduce that, what you see in commercial to gov, to make it a little bit better, so it's not as much of a disparity.
So quickly, let's squeak in one last question. And I think there's a question here, Sherri, that's dear to your heart. So what CMDB product do you recommend? And also, is Azure Arc going to gov? Well, a couple things. I don't necessarily have a favorite CMDB product, but there's also a strategy in tagging where you can create a very lightweight CMDB for you. In addition, there's a lot of tools you can create with some of the products. It's a little bit more about involved conversation that we have right here. But my friend Sherri, she's been looking into Azure Arc a lot. Hey, anything about government cloud where that's coming into right now? When's it ready?
It's already out there. Right now we have some of the VMs, and we do have connectors over from different AWS, from Google Cloud, from Security Center, and we're starting to see that Sentinel, and so that's coming out. The VM might be still in preview, I'll caveat that, but you should see that available. So
pretty much it's still like almost like a Kubernetes type of orchestration engine at this time, basically, right?
But it is pretty cool. And I say that, that's why I said it was near and dear to my heart. And I say that because we're working diligently. We do understand a lot of resources coming out and a lot of documents that are getting updated right now, going through reviews that are going to explain more of the ARC piece of it and being able to centrally manage. That's really what you're doing, that management plane.
I see.
So, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, in closing, here's what I want to say. The last thing, I want to thank you for my panel, the panel that joined tonight to answer the questions. But more importantly, go out and play in your Azure subscription tonight after this session. Don't wait for something to come up. Get ahead of the curve. Don't be afraid of having mistakes or errors. That's how we learn. With that, I turn this over to our host. Hey, Karina, I think you're muted.
Yep.
No, thank you, everyone. It's hard to say goodbye when you're on mute. So thank you for joining. Again, it's hashtag Azure Gov Meetup. This was an excellent session. Thank you to all our speakers. And then also thank you guys for attending tonight. I know you're taking time out to learn more about Azure and what's going on in government right now in cloud. So we really appreciate that. Check us out. We're going to be back on February 24th. We're building the agenda now. So look out for that agenda and have a good night. Thanks, everyone.